He laughed when he said it. Actually laughed. "We're downsizing," Brennan announced, like it was the punchline to a joke only he understood. I sat there in his office, watching his mouth curve into that familiar smirk, and something inside me went numb. The leather chair beneath me suddenly felt too hot. My collar tightened around my throat. 8 years. I'd given this company 8 years of my life. Late nights fixing their broken systems, weekends answering client emergencies, holidays spent building the processes that kept everything running smoothly. And now I was just another line item in a cost-cutting spreadsheet. My chair scraped against the carpet as I stood. My palms were damp, and my heartbeat thundered so loud I barely heard him explain the severance package. He slid a folder across his desk like he was doing me a favor. I picked it up, turned, and walked out. Past the conference room where I'd led dozens of training sessions. Past the cubicles where my colleagues suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Into the elevator with a cardboard box that felt heavier than it should. As the doors closed, I made myself a promise. I would remember that laugh, and I would make it useful. The walk home took 40 minutes because I couldn't afford a cab anymore. My legs shook the entire way. Every few steps, I'd see Brennan's face in my mind. That casual cruelty, like my career was just background noise in his day. The afternoon sun felt too bright, making my eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. The city moved around me, people rushing to jobs they still had, and I felt invisible. Like I'd been erased from the world of working people in a single conversation. A bus roared past and sprayed dirty water across my shoes. I looked down at my blazer, the one I'd bought on sale 2 years ago and kept pristine for important meetings. Now it was splattered with street grime. I wiped it with my sleeve and kept walking. Rent was due in 12 days. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, doing math I didn't want to do. Severance would cover 2 months if I was careful. 3 if I was extreme. After that, the number at the bottom of the screen felt like a countdown timer. I passed my favorite coffee shop and didn't go in. Past the dry cleaners, where I couldn't afford to take anything anymore. Just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, until I reached my apartment building. I dumped the cardboard box on my kitchen table. Inside, a coffee mug with the company logo, a dusty desk plant I'd forgotten to water, and a folder of performance reviews. The plant's leaves were brown at the edges, dying from neglect, just like my career had. I spread the reviews out and read every word. Exceeds expectations, critical team member, innovative problem solver. The words felt hollow now, like compliments whispered to a ghost, like lies someone told to keep me working hard while planning to dispose of me anyway. My laptop sat beside the pile, still logged into the company VPN. I had 48 hours before they'd cut my access completely. I spent 20 minutes downloading every process document I'd created, every workflow map I'd designed, every training guide I'd written. They were my words, my systems, my knowledge. They couldn't take that. I opened a fresh document and titled it, "What I Still Control." Under it I wrote my time, my skills, my experience, my reputation, my network. 5 things. It didn't feel like much compared to what I'd lost, but it was something. Then I made another list, what they can't touch. My vendor relationships, my industry connections, the way I could spot broken processes and fix them. The calm I brought to chaos. I stared at both lists until my eyes burned. The next morning I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it something honest: survival budget, rent, utilities, groceries, bus fare, minimum payments on 2 credit cards I'd been meaning to pay off. The numbers added up to something scary but manageable, for now. My savings account balance stared back at me like a challenge. How long could I make this last? How careful did I need to be? The questions made my stomach hurt. I added one line at the bottom: fresh flowers, $8. I refused to live in a space with zero beauty, even if I was broke. Especially if I was broke. Some things mattered more than money. Then I set a timer for 90 minutes and opened my email. 3 local businesses I'd been watching for months. Companies that seemed to be growing but struggling with organization. I'd always told myself I was too busy to reach out. Now I had nothing but time. I wrote 3 pitches. Short, direct, specific. I noticed your inventory system seems manual. I can streamline it in 2 weeks. Your client onboarding takes too long. I can fix that. You're losing time on scheduling conflicts. I have a solution. My finger hovered over the send button. Fear crawled up my spine. Then I remembered Brennan's laugh and clicked send 3 times. When the timer went off, I felt terrified. I also felt awake. A neighborhood cafe responded within 3 hours. The owner, Sophie, asked if I could come by that afternoon. I changed into my clean blazer, the one that wasn't stained, and took the bus across town. My stomach twisted the entire ride. I kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd present myself as confident and capable instead of desperate and recently fired. The words tangled in my mind, refusing to sound natural. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and old paper. Sophie met me at the door, exhausted and hopeful at the same time. She led me to the stockroom and my jaw dropped. Open syrup bottles with no labels, unlabeled bins stacked randomly, a clipboard hanging on the wall with dates from 2 years ago. I keep running out of things, Sophie said quietly, or ordering too much. I can't figure out why. I spent 4 hours reorganizing her entire system. Color-coded bins, reorder points on sticky notes, a simple spreadsheet linked to her sales data. By closing time, she had a system that would tell her exactly what to order and when. Sophie handed me an envelope of cash. I wish you'd come sooner, she said. I took that money home like a trophy. Word of mouth spread faster than I expected. The florist 3 blocks down emailed me. Then a print shop owner whose friend knew Sophie. Then a tiny nonprofit drowning in volunteer schedules and donation tracking. Each new client felt like proof that I had value, that Brennan had been wrong about me being disposable, that what I knew actually mattered to people who needed help. I worked past midnight most nights, lit by a desk lamp and pure determination. Each invoice I sent had my name at the top in bold letters. Each project felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that Brennan had tried to throw away. My dining table became my office. My laptop never closed. I lived on coffee and cheap pasta. But I was building something. Something that was mine. Something nobody could take away with a single conversation and a cruel laugh. One morning, I woke up to 7 new emails. 5 were questions about my availability. 2 were referrals from people I'd never met. I sat there in my pajamas, staring at my inbox, and realized something had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. And nobody could fire me from something I owned. My phone buzzed with another inquiry. Then another. I made a fresh pot of coffee and got to work. I started stitching together a portfolio. Screenshots of before and after spreadsheets. Client quotes that didn't sound like marketing copy. Simple descriptions of what I actually did. I find the chaos in your operations and turn it into calm. Each piece of evidence felt like armor, protecting me from ever feeling as powerless as I had in Brennan's office. This was proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I could build things that helped people. 8 years at my old job had taught me everything Brennan never valued. I knew how to spot bottlenecks before they became disasters. I could steady teams when everything felt like it was falling apart. I spoke the language of operations without making people defensive. I built a 1-page website on a free platform. At the top, I wrote my own title, Builder of Calm Systems. It felt pretentious when I typed it, but 3 more contracts landed that week, so I left it. One client told me, "You see things we don't see." Another said, "You make hard things feel possible." I saved those messages in a folder labeled Evidence. Late one night, I updated my resume for the first time in 8 years. Under experience, I listed everything I'd been doing since the layoff. Consultant, systems designer, process architect. Each word felt more real than former employee ever had. A founder named Aria found me through a referral chain I couldn't quite trace. She asked if I could jump on a call. I said yes immediately, then spent 30 minutes panicking about what to wear for a video meeting. I settled on a simple shirt and made sure the wall behind me looked professional. My hands were shaking when I clicked the video link. This felt bigger than the small local clients. This felt like a real chance. Aria's startup had grown faster than its foundation. We've lost 2 major clients because we keep missing deadlines. She explained, her voice tired but sharp. Everyone's working hard, but nothing's landing on time. I think we're broken, but I can't see where. I asked her to walk me through a typical project. She described chaos. 7 people touching the same deliverable, no clear handoffs, deadline extensions that became the norm. By minute 15, I could see the shape of the problem. By minute 20, I knew I could fix it. "Can you start Monday?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Then I hung up and cried into my kitchen towel. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed being needed, really needed, not just tolerated. Not just a line item in someone's budget. I texted Sophie, the cafe owner. "Just landed something big. Thank you for being first." She replied with a string of celebration emojis. My first day at Arya's company felt like stepping into a different universe. The office smelled like fresh paint and nervous energy. Sliding glass doors, open floor plan, a dozen people who all looked exhausted and determined at the same time. Plants on every desk, actually alive and thriving. Natural light flooding through massive windows. Everything felt deliberate, intentional, cared for. So different from the corporate beige of my old office, where even the plants seemed to be slowly dying. Arya introduced me as the person who's going to help us breathe again. I didn't promise miracles. I promised a plan. We spent the entire morning mapping dependencies on the wall with sticky notes. Every task, every handoff, every approval bottleneck. By lunch, the wall looked like stained glass. Colorful, chaotic, but finally visible. "We're not failing," I told the team, standing in front of our sticky note masterpiece. "We're just out of order. We can fix order." I watched their shoulders drop an inch. Mine rose. That afternoon, we identified the 3 biggest bottlenecks and created a 2-week sprint to untangle them. Clear owners, clear deadlines, clear consequences. Nothing fancy, just visible. One developer, Carla, stayed late to ask me questions. "Is it always this simple?" she asked. "Only when someone finally looks," I said. I took the train home that night, replaying Arya's words, "Keep going." They felt like permission. 2 weeks later, we shipped a project on time for the first time in months. The client who'd been sharpening their knives sent a message. "Whatever you did, keep doing it." I read that email 3 times, letting the validation sink into my bones. This was what success felt like when you built it yourself. When nobody could take credit for your work or dismiss your contribution with a laugh and a downsizing announcement. In the all-hands meeting, Arya stood up and nodded toward me. "We're getting stable," she said simply. "That's because of the systems we're building together." The team clapped. It wasn't loud or long, but it was real. I felt something warm and tight in my chest, something I hadn't felt since before the layoff. Pride, maybe, or proof. I took the train home that evening and didn't check my phone once. Just watched the city slide past the window and let myself feel good about something. That night, I slept without clenching my jaw for the first time in months. No nightmares about empty bank accounts, no replaying Brennan's laugh in my head, just sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I made coffee and sat at my table. On a notepad I wrote, "You're not disposable." I underlined it twice. Then I got ready for work. One afternoon I had a meeting across town and took a route that passed my old office building. Same mirrored windows reflecting the sky. Same lobby plants that always looked like they were barely surviving. Same revolving door I'd walked through 1,000 times, back when I thought loyalty mattered, back when I believed hard work guaranteed security. The building looked smaller now, less impressive. Just another structure filled with people pretending they were safe from the next round of cuts. I slowed down as I walked past. Through the glass, I could see the security desk, the elevator bank, the hallway to Brennan's office. None of it belonged to me anymore. I pressed my fingers against my wrist and felt my pulse, steady, alive, moving forward. "Not home," I whispered to myself. "Not anymore." Then I kept walking. My shoes clicked against the sidewalk with a rhythm that felt sure. My spine felt taller than it used to. I didn't look back. A block later, my phone buzzed with a message from Arya. "Just closed another deal. You're magic." I smiled and kept walking toward the meeting that was waiting for me. Toward the future I was building. Away from the past that had tried to discard me. That evening, I hung a small whiteboard above my desk at home. At the top, I wrote in bold letters, 3 steps ahead. The marker squeaked against the surface, and I pressed harder to make the words darker, more permanent. This wasn't just a motivational phrase. It was a strategy, a promise to myself that I'd never be caught off guard again, never be vulnerable to someone else's cruel laughter and casual dismissal. Under it, I listed my strategy. Step 1, Build stability so I'm never disposable again. Step 2. Anticipate where the market is going and get there first. Step 3. Choose my moments carefully. I didn't know exactly how those steps would intersect with Brennan, but some quiet part of me knew they would. The business world was smaller than people thought, especially in our industry. I started tracking patterns. Mid-sized companies were getting burned by sloppy layoffs elsewhere. They were desperate for partners who could deliver without drama. They wanted steady hands, not corporate chaos. There was an opportunity there. I could feel its shape even if I couldn't see it clearly yet. I took a photo of the whiteboard and set it as my phone background. A reminder every time I checked the time or read a message. Stay 3 steps ahead. Plan. Anticipate. Choose. Brennan had laughed when he thought he had power over my future. He didn't understand that he'd only had power over my present. My future was always mine to build. Arya and I started designing a new service offering. We'd noticed something. Companies that had just gone through messy downsizing were desperate for reliable partners. They needed someone who could onboard fast, deliver clean work, and communicate honestly about timelines. What if we built a rescue service? I suggested during a brainstorming session, something for companies in crisis. Arya leaned forward. Keep talking. I outlined it on the whiteboard. 7-day onboarding, transparent project tracking, daily status updates, guaranteed handoffs. No surprises, no excuses, just calm, reliable delivery. We need a name, Arya said. I thought about Sophie's chaotic stockroom, about Carla's relieved face when the dependencies became visible, about my own desperate need for stability after everything fell apart. The calm transfer, I said. Arya grinned. Perfect. We launched it on a Tuesday. By Friday, 3 requests for proposals hit my inbox. By the following Monday, we had 2 serious conversations with companies I recognized from industry news. They'd both recently made headlines for operational disasters. The market was bigger than we thought. Desperation was everywhere. We just had to show up prepared. One morning, a procurement officer from a major client reached out. She'd heard about our calm transfer through someone who knew someone. They needed help immediately. We just lost our primary vendor, she explained on the call. Missed deadlines, poor communication, complete breakdown. We're bleeding money and reputation. Can you help? I asked for details. She sent over the project scope and I opened the file. My breath caught. The logo at the top belonged to Brennan's company. They'd been servicing this account for years. It was their biggest client, the one they'd always bragged about in meetings, the one that supposedly justified their entire operational strategy. And they'd just lost it. I didn't tell Arya what that logo meant to me. I just said, I can write this proposal. Give me 48 hours. I worked through the night, building a plan sharp enough to cut through every excuse. Every lesson I'd learned at my old job, every system I'd built, every workflow I'd perfected, it all went into that proposal. By morning, it was ready. I sent it over and waited. The procurement officer replied within 6 hours. We'd like to meet. Can you bring your team for a working session next Tuesday? I accepted immediately. Then I checked the attendee list she'd forwarded. Arya and I from our side, their operations director and project lead from theirs. And one more name that made my stomach flip. Brennan. I stared at that name for a full minute. Brennan would be in the room, watching me present, watching me compete for the client he'd lost. Step 3 hovered in my mind like a quiet whisper. Choose the moment. This was the moment. I picked out my best blazer, the one I'd bought with my first real check from Arya's company. I polished my shoes until they gleamed. I printed the proposal on premium paper. The night before the meeting, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and practiced my opening. My voice didn't shake. My hands stayed steady. I looked like someone who belonged in that room. 3 steps ahead. I whispered to my reflection. Then I went to bed early and slept like a stone. Conference room C smelled like old coffee and tension. Arya and I arrived exactly 3 minutes early, late enough to seem confident, early enough to respect their time. The operations director, a sharp woman named Claudia, greeted us warmly. Her project lead looked exhausted but hopeful. We made small talk while we waited for the last attendee. Then Brennan walked in. He froze when he saw me, actually froze mid-step, his smile catching on his teeth like a broken mechanism. For a second, the room went silent. Brennan, I said evenly, good to see you. I meant it in the way that means, I see you clearly now. I see exactly what you are. He recovered quickly, forcing that familiar smirk back onto his face. Well, small world. Very, I agreed. We all sat down. Arya and I on one side, Claudia and her team on the other. Brennan at the end, shifting in his chair like he couldn't find a comfortable position. I opened my laptop and began the presentation. My voice was steady. My slides were clean, and I didn't look at Brennan once. I led with our calm transfer framework, no theatrics, no overselling. Just clear explanations of how we'd stabilize their operations in 7 days, create transparent tracking systems, and deliver consistent results. Claudia asked hard questions. I had harder answers. Brennan kept shifting in his seat. I noticed a tremor in his hand when he reached for his pen. The confident man who'd laughed while firing me looked small under the fluorescent lights. Your previous vendor promised similar timelines, Claudia said carefully. What makes you different? I glanced at Arya, then back to Claudia. We don't promise what we can't deliver. Every timeline in our proposal has buffer built in. Every deliverable has a backup owner. We communicate problems early, not late. Brennan cleared his throat. We experienced some unexpected turnover, which is why we're here, Claudia interrupted gently. She turned to me. We'll need references. Today, if possible. I slid a printed list across the table. 6 clients, all recent, all willing to talk immediately. Claudia picked it up and scanned it. Brennan didn't touch it. These are impressive, Claudia said softly. I just nodded. Let the work speak. Halfway through the meeting, Claudia's phone lit up. She glanced at it and frowned. Excuse me, she said, reading quickly. Then she looked at Brennan. We were told your team could stabilize our project in 6 weeks. Is that still accurate? Brennan's smile went crooked. We've had some staffing changes, but yes. How many people have left in the past 2 months? Claudia asked. He paused too long. A few, normal attrition. I remembered the elevator full of boxes. The colleagues who wouldn't meet my eyes. The parade of quiet exits that followed my own. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Claudia could do math. She made a note on her tablet and moved on. But the energy in the room had shifted. Brennan looked smaller. His confidence leaked out like air from a punctured tire. We finished the presentation. Arya added some thoughts about our team structure and communication protocols. It was professional, thorough, honest. When we wrapped up, Claudia shook our hands. We'll be in touch very soon, she said. Her tone suggested she'd already decided. Brennan tried to add something, but Claudia was already walking us out. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an old colleague, someone who still worked at Brennan's company. Heard you were in a meeting today. You should know more layoffs happened last week. Brennan cut the retention bonuses he promised. People are walking. Clients are nervous. I read it twice. Then I opened my laptop and looked at our proposal again. The calm transfer suddenly felt less like a service and more like a life raft. I updated our plan to include crisis protocols, triage teams that could mobilize in 48 hours, rapid audits, emergency stabilization procedures. Things companies needed when their vendors imploded. My hands shook while I typed. Not from fear, from recognition. I knew exactly what was happening inside Brennan's company because I'd lived through the beginning of it. The difference was, now I was on the outside with skills and options. They were on the inside watching it crumble. I sent the updated proposal to Claudia with a note, additional support options if needed. She replied within the hour, exactly what I was hoping for. Another message arrived from my old colleague. Remember that service assurance clause you wrote? The one about vendor stability? It just activated. I pulled up the old contract language I drafted years ago. Clause 47B. If a vendor lost more than 20% of key staff within 90 days, the client could exit without penalty. I'd written that clause to protect the client I cared about. I'd spent hours perfecting the language, making sure it was airtight. Brennan had signed off on it without reading carefully. He probably didn't even remember it existed. But I did. 8 years of invisible work suddenly stood up, raised a hand and said, I'm still here. I updated our transition timeline and sent it to Claudia. If you need to move quickly, we're ready. She replied, preparing contract now. I sat back in my chair and let out a long breath. Brennan had laughed when he thought he was winning. He hadn't realized he was playing against his own past decisions, against systems I'd built, against a clause I'd written to protect exactly this kind of situation. 3 steps ahead meant planning for futures he couldn't imagine. We presented the full transition plan like paramedics, calm, precise, zero wasted words. Arya handled the technical breakdown while I walked through the timeline. Claudia's shoulders dropped with each phase I described. "Can you start Monday?" she asked. "We can start tonight," I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. Brennan tried one last move. "You should know," he said, forcing a laugh, "that transitions like this are rarely as smooth as they sound." The laugh landed wrong, brittle, desperate. It cracked in the air and fell at our feet. Claudia looked at him coolly. "That's why we're making a change." The meeting ended. Contracts would be sent within hours. We stood to leave. Arya squeezed my shoulder as we walked out. I felt light, like gravity had loosened its grip, like I was finally standing at my full height. Brennan caught me in the hallway outside the conference room. Arya had gone ahead to take a call. It was just him and me in the corridor, fluorescent lights humming overhead. "You could have warned me," he said. His voice was different now. Smaller. His eyes looked glassy. I thought about the day he'd laughed, about carrying that box through the office while everyone looked away, about the shame that lived in my chest for weeks, heavy and hot. "I did warn you," I said gently. 8 years was my warning. He blinked, opened his mouth, closed it. "I built systems that protected your clients," I continued. "I wrote clauses that saved you from your own mistakes. I fixed problems before you knew they existed. That was all a warning. You just weren't listening." He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he was. "Good luck," I said. I meant it. Not in a kind way, in a factual way. He was going to need it. I walked back to where Arya was waiting, didn't look back. Claudia called at 7:42 that evening. "We're moving forward with your team," she said. "Contract documents are in your inbox." I opened my laptop with shaking hands. The email loaded like sunrise. Slow, inevitable, beautiful. I scanned every line, every clause, every number. It was real. I forwarded it to Arya with a simple message: "We did it." Then I walked over to my whiteboard and took a photo of those 3 steps I'd written months ago. 3 steps ahead. The words felt prophetic now, like I'd known something before I knew it. I wanted to frame that photo. Instead, I opened my email and found Brennan's old severance message, still sitting in my archives. I deleted it. Then I emptied the trash. The past didn't need storage space anymore. 2 weeks later, we hosted Claudia's team in our office. They arrived looking cautiously optimistic, like people who'd been burned before and were trying to trust again. We walked them through our progress. Milestones hit, communications protocols working, team members assigned and thriving. Claudia nodded along, taking notes, asking questions that showed she actually understood what we were doing. Midway through the check-in, someone slipped into the back of the room. I glanced up, and there was Brennan, small behind a stack of borrowed folders. He'd been invited as a courtesy for knowledge transfer. He sat in the corner and listened. When Claudia said, "This is what trust feels like," I felt something unclench in my chest that I hadn't even noticed was there. After the meeting, I stood by the window watching the city move below. My team laughed in the kitchen, the soft sound of coffee cups and conversation floating through the office. Brennan left without saying goodbye. I watched him walk to the elevator, shoulders hunched, and felt nothing. No triumph, no revenge, just peace. That evening, I stayed late at the office. Everyone else had gone home, but I wasn't ready to leave yet. I stood by the window and watched the sun set over the city, painting the buildings gold and amber. 3 steps ahead hadn't been about revenge. It had been about building something Brennan couldn't touch. Stability that didn't depend on someone else's approval. Clarity about what I was worth. Success that didn't need a punchline. Brennan had laughed when he fired me because he thought he had power over my future. He didn't understand that he'd only had power over my present. My future was always mine to build. I thought about that cardboard box, that walk home in the rain, that fear that had felt so enormous. It had been real, but it hadn't been the end. My phone buzzed. Arya sent a message. "Drinks to celebrate?" I grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. The doors opened and I stepped inside, watching our office disappear as I descended. But this time, I wasn't carrying a box. I was carrying keys to something I'd built myself. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. I walked out into the evening air, 3 steps ahead of where I used to be, and smiled. This was what winning looked like, not watching someone else fall, but standing somewhere they couldn't reach.